Welcome back to this special edition of the Law Show. Bob Kerrigan with you this evening talking about personal injury claims and cases, accidental death cases, which incorporate all kinds of ways accidents can happen in the hospital, with a doctor, in an automobile, an airplane, a train, a boat. Wherever they happen, lawyers can evaluate the cause of the accident, and as we discussed earlier, the liability or fault. Did that liability or fault or act cause an injury, and was the injury substantial in nature? So what I've gotten here are some exhibits that my brother, Dr. Kerrigan, who had a PhD in anatomy and was with us for many, many years, and produced some of the most amazing exhibits of any trial lawyers or law firms that, honestly, that you will ever see. So I just want to talk for a minute about some of them and to show you the kinds of exhibits that we are using in trial. You can put an x-ray up and you can show the x-ray, and the jury sees marks on it. Most of us can't even read x-rays. Only the radiologists read them very effectively anyway. But this kind of exhibit shows the magnitude of trauma or injury to the human skull in this case. And we do it for all parts of the body, but I have some examples here of very, very tragic skull injuries. And this was actually used in a case and actually represents an injured person. I'll show you some others here quickly, and we'll go to this exhibit here where you can see that this jaw has been wired shut based upon the trauma that this particular patient or client sustained. These obviously are representative samples of what's happened, but they are made to scale. This is a precise example or duplication of how this particular client was injured in an automobile. This one was an automobile accident. Here is another example of the same kinds of things, only entirely different facial injuries. And you can see the very precise cuts and measurements here in this skull because they have been made based on the x-rays that were taken in the case, so that this is not just some fabrication or exaggeration. Each one of these fractures are traceable precisely to the x-ray. And then we have the physician look at these x-rays and look at the skull models that we've made, and they attest to the accuracy of it, so the jury then can see the magnitude of the injury to the person. And finally, one more, and these are just illustrative examples of what we have. Another typical kind of badly injured fractured skull. None of these patients and our clients died as a result of these injuries, but they have lifelong problems, including arthritis and other problems as a result of these injuries. In addition to this sort of demonstration, here's just a quick thing. We'll just hold this up. I don't need a close-up shot of this, but this was one of my favorite clients. He's a terrific fellow over in the Gulf County area. He fell through a porch because the landowner had not properly maintained the porch. He was a big fellow, and he fell down and completely crushed both of his ankles. This is an exact replica of the injury that he sustained, and was very persuasive in establishing the magnitude of the damages. Remember, I discussed damages. That's the same thing as injuries. It means the same thing in the law. What kind of injuries did the person sustain? Now, for example, in this case, if this person would have cut his face at a different time, unrelated to this accident, he would not be entitled to recover those kinds of damages. Only damages that were caused by the negligent act of the actor or the corporation or person that was involved. And we use these kinds of exhibits regularly in our trial. I have some others here. I just took a few pictures that we're going to show you now on the screen of exhibits that we've had in trials. This is a massive fracture to the side of this person's skull. Some of these, one or two of these, we actually have on the set here today, so I'm just going to go through these quickly and describe them. That you saw that particular replication there of the facial jaw injury that had to be wired shut. And we'll go to the next one. This is a compound, many fractures to the face, including the nose and jaw, and that's a head-on collision case, as I recall. And the next one. We're going to talk about this. Well, you've not seen this before, and this is pretty devastating when you look at this. You think, with 57 fractures in this person's skull, how did they live? We'll talk about this particular case in more detail when we talk about products liability. You have not seen that on the set here. All right, want to go to the next one? And this, I think we have also have here live on the set. Maybe not. I can't look in front and tell for sure, but this is, again, the socket of the eye, the nose, both cheekbones, crushed across the top of the mouth. Almost all of these involve collisions that were head-on type collisions where people sustained these kinds of injuries. All right. That's a frontal view of the shot that you just saw and how we attempt to replicate it. Every single fracture mark here is identical to the X-ray. There's nothing here that's exaggerated, or because that would be a very dangerous thing to do, to show something to the jury that's not reflected in the actual medical records, the objective medical records like the X-rays. Okay? Now here's just a kind of a typical case we look at where we have a prosthesis. This is a prosthesis implanted in a femur that it takes the place of what was fractured and lost. And so this person has this big steel ball that's like a big ball bearing in the femur that supports the leg. Typical leg fracture cases, we see these quite often in head-on collision cases, especially where the legs are jammed into the floorboard of a car. Next. Well, here we have shown a tremendous injury to the lower extremity of the body, and you can see these weight-bearing bones that are coming from the hip, the femur, and you can see these terrible fractures there. Again, this makes this come alive for our juries, where they can see what's happened and look at it, and then they look at the X-rays, and then it all seems to make more sense, okay? Here, because of the nature of the fracture, they had to place a plate in the leg. Many of you probably have known people who have had similar procedures for fractures. That's just a close-up view. We duplicate the exact plate so the jury can know what's in a person's body as opposed to just having an X-ray picture. Next. Another dual fracture here. You can see the head of the femur, and you can see in the middle of the femur where the fracture was. Again, these fracture sites are exactly duplicate of the X-rays that of the patient. Terrible injury there to the lower leg. This is the kind of exhibit that we do. I showed you one on the set here. This is a compound. This is a dual fracture to the tibia on both legs. You can see the small bone is the fibula. It's also fractured in the model on the right. These fractures, again, are exact duplications of what the patient experienced. That's a heel fracture and a bad one. That model was made to depict the precise injury to the heel. Sometimes these heel fractures are so bad that they literally have to fuse the bones in the foot. You may know someone that's had that happen to them, where you can't move your foot other than just a prop really to support your body. I recently had a case in which a young man was injured in an automobile accident, a motorcycle accident, and had a terrible fracture to his heel that the fusion was going to cause him more pain than not, and unfortunately he had to have his lower leg amputated. We see these kinds of crush type injuries in falls, industrial falls, and in some automobile accidents, and in this particular case I just talked to you about, it was a motorcycle accident. Next. Same thing here. We've got leg bones. Those are models of the tibia and the fibula, both fractured. Here's multiple fractures to the hand. You know, most of the time these things heal, and people say, well, the hand looks okay to me. They don't understand that within the hand, these very small bones, when they're fractured, can cause all kinds of problems in the use of your hand for the rest of your life. This is just another fracture, probably another depiction of fractures of the lower skull and the vertebrae below. Here's a plate in an arm, much like the plate in the leg we just saw. Again, bad fractures to the hand. Sometimes those crush injuries occur typically in automobile or motorcycle accidents is where we see these kinds of injuries the most. And this last one is another simple exhibit, but it's pretty graphic in terms of the nature of the injury that was sustained by this person. And we have found in our work that displaying this sort of thing to juries, it's expensive to do it, it's time-consuming, and it's difficult work. Not very few people can do this sort of thing, but it has been very effective in the work that we have done and the trials that we have had where there have been very, very, very bad injuries. You talk about them, you see them on an x-ray, the doctor might describe them, but the jury can't really feel it without seeing a little bit more about the detail here.